It's very good to have you all here for our first service of the new year. 2026 is upon us, shockingly. This happens every year, and yet I'm always surprised when we get here, and it's something new all over again. But I'm very glad that we could be here. This morning's service is a Honko service, and this is a very important service in the sort of liturgical year of Jodo Shinshu. It happens to come at the beginning of the year, and this is when we observe the memorial service for Shinran Shonin, the founder of this tradition. Often we will chant the Shoshinge in honor of Shinran Shonin at this time. He's the author of the Shoshinge. This is most sort of famous and important work, but it's really, really long. And so we discussed it. You know, we had it on the program at first, but we discussed it and thought, you know, that's a long time for people to have to sit and chant, and they may all be exhausted by the end of that. So we switched over instead to the Jusege, which is a lot shorter, and it's something that we often do at Buddhist gatherings, right? I think we're all very familiar with the Jusege. Jusege, this is a portion of the larger Pure Land Sutra. And that's very important because Shinran considered this to be the sort of central, the highest, the most important of all of the Buddhist teachings, the larger Pure Land Sutra. Jusege is the section of the sutra that occurs right after Dharmakara Bodhisattva has made 48 great vows, vows that he will accomplish in order to create the Pure Land. So that's why Jusege starts with Dharmakara proclaiming, as we just recited, I've established the all-surpassing vows and will unfailingly attain supreme enlightenment, because he's just done so, and now he's making that declaration. So in my Dharma talk this morning, I want to talk to you about something particular to one of those vows, the 18th vow we talk about a lot. This vow has something, a portion of it, which is known as the exclusion clause. And this is something that many people find sort of confusing, so I'm going to talk about it here. It's actually prompted because Myra Takasaki, who many of you probably know, she's a member of the Toronto Temple, and she lives in Waterloo, which is also where I live. So she's been doing the Jodo Shinshu correspondence course, and I've been lending her books and talking to her about the material when it gets confusing and this sort of thing. And she was puzzled and kind of confused about this exclusion clause that we find in the 18th vow, which she came across in her studies there in the correspondence course. And indeed, this is a confusing aspect of the teachings. So if you don't know how Shinran Shonin approached the exclusion clause, it's very easy to misunderstand. So I want to take some time this morning to talk about it, in case anyone else comes across it and feels puzzled by what it means. This is maybe a little more of a doctrine-heavy Dharma talk than I often do. Often my Dharma talks, I try to have some humor in them and maybe, you know, tell some related to some personal story or something in some way, so it's more relatable in this way. So I have to apologize ahead of time. I'm giving you a little more of a doctrine-heavy Dharma talk this time on a very important aspect of Shinran Shonin's teachings, because this is Honko, and if we couldn't do Shoshinge, kind of the gold standard, at the chanting time, now we're gonna apologize and focus center Shinran's teachings during the Dharma talk here. Anyways, I don't know that there's any jokes in this at all. My apologies. Don't worry. Next month, I think I'm back again for February, and that's actually going to be Valentine's Day. So we'll have a lighter Dharma talk. I promise. Come back for that. All right. So in Jodo Shinshu, we talk a lot about the primal vow of Amida Buddha. This is the central, most important aspect of Shinran's teachings. And so this is, of course, therefore, the most important part of our tradition. As it usually gets emphasized, the primal vow means that Amida Buddha embraces absolutely everyone without discrimination and enables their liberation from suffering through achieving enlightenment in the Pure Land. The primal vow is especially embodied in the 18th vow of Dharmakara Bodhisattva in the larger Pure Land Sutra, which just preceded the portion which we chanted together. And this vow states, this is a quote, if when I attain Buddhahood, The sentient beings of the 10 quarters, with sincere mind, entrust themselves, aspire to be born in my land, and say my name, perhaps even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain the supreme enlightenment. So great, but that phrasing is from a long time ago, and it's been translated through several languages before reaching us. So honestly, it's kind of construction seems a little wonky to us in English, so it can be helpful to put it into a plainer English translation. So in modern English, this vow would actually sound like this, quote, when I attain Buddhahood, living creatures throughout the universe who sincerely trust in me, wish to enter my land and say the Nimbutsu, even just briefly, will all be admitted to the Pure Land. If any are left out, then may I not reach enlightenment. That's what that actually says, and just a plainer, more modern English translation there. So great, huh? All you have to do is say the Nimbutsu and be carried on the power of the vow. Everyone is included, all the beings throughout the universe. That includes humans, bugs, ghosts, you name it. Everybody is included in this vow here. However, that's not actually the entirety of the vow as written. I left a portion out. I read the first part, but right after all that, there's one more line. It actually continues and goes, quote, excluded are those who commit the 5 grave offenses and those who slander the right Dharma. So wait a minute. I thought this was the great welcoming, non-judgmental vow that embraces everyone. This is how we talk about it all the time in Jodo Shinshu, right? But then it specifically excludes some people. What is going on here? Why do we say it embraces everyone when it says right there, there's 5 kinds of people plus another kind of person that are not allowed in? So to inquire into this, first, let's define some of the terms that are being used here in the vow. So first of all, it says excluded are people who commit the 5 grave offenses. So yeah, I'm a university professor, so it's pop quiz time. Does anyone know what the 5 grave offenses are? Any of them? You don't have to get all 5. Does anyone know any of them at all? Let's see, right? Killing is in there, but it's more specific for the 5 grave offenses. Lying is something we should avoid, but it's not one of the 5 grave offenses. Yep. Doesn't mean go do it, but it's not the worst of the worst. Yeah, see, we're all stumped. Even though this is in the vows, we talk about stuff all the time. This gets said, but we just kind of scoot right past it and everything, right? So here we go. Don't worry, my students also didn't do well on the final either, and they knew it was coming. They had time to study, so don't worry, don't worry. All right. So what are the 5 grave offenses? Okay, so killing obviously is very bad. So is lying. These are part of the 5 lay precepts, right? In general, not harming, not speaking falsehoods, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not abusing intoxicants. These are 5 basic sort of moral guidelines or behavioral guidelines for Buddhists, generally speaking. Monks follow those, but also lay people often take on at least those 5. Monks also have a zillion other rules they have to follow, right? Okay, so those are all like general. The 5 grave offenses are like the 5 worst versions of these sort of things that you could do. And according to the Buddhist tradition, these are killing your mother specifically, killing your father specifically, killing a monk specifically, right? Don't kill anybody, but if you kill someone, make sure it's not like your parents or like, the Dalai Lama or someone like that. It's basically what they're saying here, right? Injuring a Buddha is number 4, or causing the Sangha to break up, to dissolve into chaos and this sort of thing, right? These are the 5 grave offenses. Don't do these things. Don't do other bad things too, but like really, really avoid these 5 is what the tradition is saying. So obviously there's a lot of other wrong karmic actions we could commit, and they also can bring, serious karmic consequences. But these are the top 5 worst ones, according to sort of the classical tradition. And they were believed to create karma so terrible that you would be reborn in the hell realms for like an impossibly long time. So like for real, just don't do that is, the advice here. And then what about slandering the Dharma? That's the other portion of this too. What is that? Well, slandering the Dharma means to insult Buddhism or Buddhists, or to claim that Buddhism is fake or ineffective, basically to undermine it in these ways. So why are these sorts of behaviors supposedly enough to exclude you from the primal vow? If we look at them, we see two different things going on in this sort of list. One thing that's going on is attacks on Buddhism, such as verbally or even violently attacking Buddhists or otherwise severely weakening Buddhism, right, causing the Sangha to break up or something like this, right? The problem here, right, is that the Dharma is the vehicle for ending suffering in this world. So if you cause serious damage to Buddhism, then you lower the ability of everyone to be freed from suffering. These aren't just things that create, sort of some bad karma for yourself. You're injuring everyone else by doing these things because now they have diminished access to the practices and tactics and insights that help them to become free from suffering. So it has much wider ripple effects, these sort of behaviors. And then the other thing that we see going on here is like hatred or ingratitude towards parents, right? So in Asian culture generally, this is especially heinous as a sort of attitude or activity, right? And then from a Buddhist perspective, cultivating gratitude is a bedrock part of progress towards enlightenment. So if you can't even be grateful like to your parents who have sacrificed so much for you, they're like right there doing it your whole life in front of you, then you really have no hope of advancing towards liberation. If you can't even be grateful in this way, if you've gone and attack them or even kill them in this sort of way, how are you going to do all the further levels of gratitude and sort of heart opening that are important and necessary on the Buddhist path? So these are the sort of two things that they're pointing out are really things that need to be avoided. So the point, in fact, isn't just that these are bad in terms of like right and wrong. They're absolutely not good in terms of right or wrong, but it goes beyond that because there's other things that are also bad in terms of right and wrong. These are behaviors that additionally have serious spiritual consequences for oneself and even for the whole world if people carry these out, especially to extreme degrees. So you can understand why some people would be skeptical about people getting into the Pure Land alongside other people who are doing their best while they're going around, I don't know, like doing drive-by shootings at like Buddhist monasteries or something. You'd be like, why are those people able to go to the Pure Land, this sort of thing? You don't understand where people are coming from. Nonetheless, the problem remains. Doesn't having this sort of exclusion severely undercut the point of the vow in the first place? The point of the vow is that everyone is embraced and everyone is welcomed into the Pure Land, even though we're not perfect. The reason that the Pure Land exists, the reason that there is a Amida Buddha, is because none of us are super great on our own. All of us are imperfect, and none of us are going to be able to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps all the way into nirvana. We're going to need assistance, and the Buddha provides that assistance there. So if that's the basic understanding from the Pure Land perspective, what's going on with saying there's some people who can't get in? So how did Shinran Shonin, who emphasized the great compassion of Amida Buddha, how did he treat this exclusion clause? This is actually what I'm building towards here in my talk. Shinran actually values the exclusion clause very highly. For him, it does two things. First, it serves as a warning. These actions are really bad. They lead to great suffering that, sort of a type of suffering that stands out even in this world that's already full of suffering. These are like exceptional forms, right? So Shinran felt that the Buddha is saying, by including this exclusion clause, listen, for real, try not to do those things. It's drawing our attention to them. Like if you're going to try to avoid anything, try to avoid this sort of stuff. But even more important is the second thing that the exclusion clause does. This is the actual central crux of Shinran's way of approaching it. Shinran directly explains his perspective in a writing called Notes on Inscriptions on Sacred Scrolls. This is one of his very last teachings. They wrote very late in his life after he had a full lifetime of teaching and thinking about the Dharma and working through all of even the contradictions and the sticking points and coming to understand what it all really means in a practical sense for people. Here's what he says. He says, quote, "By showing the gravity of these two kinds of wrongdoing, these words make us realize that all the sentient beings throughout the 10 quarters, without a single exception, will be born in the Pure Land." In other words, these people are not actually excluded, the opposite from Shinran's understanding. It says, they maybe should be by our like worldly logic because they've done some really messed up stuff, but Amida Buddha does not care whatsoever about that kind of worldly logic, doesn't care about conventional right and wrong. Amida Buddha is not a judge who's deciding who gets to qualify for the Pure Land and who isn't good enough or has been too naughty, so they're left off the list, this sort of thing. Amida Buddha is great compassion that helps all suffering beings. And people who are stuck in such a dark mindset that they kill their parents or go around disrupting, the Buddhist Sangha, this sort of stuff, those people are definitely suffering. Like, how could they not be? So therefore, they're included. In fact, they're especially important to Amida Buddha, these people. These people need especially to be liberated from their suffering and from the suffering that they cause to others as well. So, in other words, by stating that these actions are unforgivable, and then sticking that clause right next to the words that say that all beings will be saved, this actually is underscoring just how wide the Buddha's compassion is. Because Amida Buddha will take everyone, even though there are some people who seem, from our unenlightened, this side of nirvana consciousness, they seem to us to be undeserving. But to the Buddha, they are not undeserving. They and all of us are included and are all taken in. Indeed, when Shinran examined himself, he found that he himself was one of the undeserving people. His mind included the same greed, the same anger, the same delusion that all of us suffer from on a daily level and certainly over the course of our lifetimes. He himself was not always filial to his parents. And he experienced periods of doubt, and he took wrong avenues in his exploration of the Dharma. He repeatedly tried different practices and then abandoned them as ineffective or incorrect. So he had not avoided being involved with the 5 grave offenses, and he had not avoided slandering or misunderstanding or misrepresenting the Dharma at various points in his lifetime, in his monastic career. Yet Shinran knew to the very core of his being that he was embraced by the light of the Buddha. The exclusion clause was the warning to him about what he shouldn't do, and it was the promise that he, Shinran, was nonetheless embraced and never abandoned. So this is the teaching then that he spread throughout Japan during the 13th century, discovering that he was part of those who, by natural rights, should be left out, but that actually, instead, he was directly grasped and included within the scope of great compassion. This meant that all beings, all people, were also grasped, were also within the purview of great compassion. This is what taught him what great compassion genuinely means. It is actually for everyone, actually does liberate everyone ultimately. So this was a very important thing for him, this exclusion clause, not because of how it excluded people, but because it actually resulted in the inclusion of all beings. So that's what this exclusion clause is about. Like I say, the language of these things is from long ago. Even the logic of how languages, were formed. It's a double negative in the actual vowels and everything. It gets kind of torturous. It's hard for us to get after a few. It's gone through several translations and everything. So it's good to kind of explain these things. If we just happen across them, they may seem odd to us. What's important is to understand them in the full context of what Shinran says and realize how he unpacks these things to show that this too is also an expression of deep, all-embracing, all-inclusive compassion. All right, so that's the message I wanted to get across here for Shinran's memorial to sort of stay faithful to and honor the essence of his teachings. Like I said, I'll have something a little lighter for you next month, I'm sure. But thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to bring the Dharma talk to an end. Let's just put our hands together in Gasho and say the Nimbutsu together. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and attention.